for joining. So my name's Zang. I am an engineer working on this project called Plasmic, which I'll be talking about today. It's a project I'm working on with a very small team. I'm excited to talk about it because it's something that started a while back as just this passion project, and it's something I hope can be useful to eventually all web developers, including users of other frameworks like Angular, et cetera. But right now we're kind of starting with React, and I think it's just interesting to talk about as sophisticated web app itself. A very complex SPA definitely has been an endless source of learnings for me and my team. And so with that, I'll get started. So I'll first talk about, so what is Plasmic? Plasmic is a visual UI builder, and it's a pretty young project. It's something we started to solve essentially two different problems. So this is the first problem, is basically we've worked for a long time on these product teams, and just building a lot of web apps and front ends, generally working with designers, and on these product teams, today at least, collaboration with design can be complex and time consuming. So I'm actually curious, maybe before going further, I don't know if there's a good way to do this in Google Meet, but just to poll the audience, if I'm curious how many of you work with a designer. Maybe if you do, just mention in the chat. That's probably the most least noisy. Oh, okay, maybe no one. I think this is actually true of my own career. Yeah, I also, when I'm lucky, I get to work with a designer, but most of the time I don't. Most of the time, engineering is left to fend for themselves somehow. And I think this is also just colored by like the kind of tool or product that you're building. But anyway, when working with designers, sometimes it can be complex. Basically, designers are very good at their craft. They create these high fidelity vector drawings, essentially, in these drawing tools that they hand off to an engineer, and then the engineer has to recreate that drawing, from scratch by hand using code, and filling in various blanks as they go. Inevitably, a lot of things get missed in this translation, or just because like these. There's a lot of details to catch, right? And I think in general, according to a lot of designers I've talked to, developers are just like generally not great at catching all the details. Or it can just be hard to translate these because designs are freeform drawings, right? And so this leads to a bunch of back and forth with design, and ultimately you have these two sources of truth on product teams that are, I think, by most teams' admission, never truly in sync. So that was the first reason for working on this, is to streamline that kind of collaboration and translation process. But the second reason, I think this is a little more selfish one, is just wanting to explore having a nicer and sort of rethought development experience for those of us who are building front ends. And this is so we can build a lot faster and hopefully at the same time eliminate an entire class of visual bugs or QA or related tooling that you might encounter. UI builders are actually nothing new. They're very widely used and have generated perfectly fine code that ships into all sorts of major apps for a long time. But primarily on other platforms like we're talking about iOS and Android and Windows. Android in the Google world, there's like the Android layout editor that's quite widely used, and so we wanted to basically bring some of that to the web, some of that tooling. So yeah, that's essentially what Plasmic is just a visual UI builder to let, primarily we're focusing on developers, to let developers craft these complex, presentational components that actually integrate into your code base and that you can work with in kind of like an unbounded way. And the idea is to let you move faster. And if you do work with a designer, then hopefully improve the collaboration that happens on these product teams. So that's a lot of words, just setting the stage for what Plasmic is and why we worked on it. But I'm going to switch gears now into this demo where I'll actually show you what Plasmic, how it actually works. And then after that, I'll dive into more of a behind the scenes look at how Plasmic works and what it took to build this and some of the challenges here. So I'm just going to first start by creating a new project here. And so Plasmic is a browser-based tool, so you can just get started pretty easily. And the idea is we kind of loosely resemble a design tool. If you're familiar with these design tools like Sketch and Figma, et cetera, kind of starts off looking similar on the surface, but you'll soon see that there's a lot of foundational differences. So the workflow that Plasmic tries to enable you to do is to be able to start from scratch and actually just create even very rough mockups, exploratory designs, just scratch work. And then from there, when you have something you like, you can incrementally refine it into something that is more robust, more suited for production. And so rather than like throwing away your work and starting from like scratch. So to show this, I'm actually going to create a to-do MVC, and actually just to give you a quick refresher of roughly what to-do MVC looks like. So this is everyone's favorite starter app. I'm not going to create the whole thing. I'm just going to create a subset of it, but and loosely. But basically, the idea is that you can just start drawing things onto the screen. So I'm going to start by plotting some text. Oh, actually, I'm going to reveal my keystrokes here real quick. So I just plotted some text on the screen. I'm going to change the font size here to be like the title size. And maybe below it, I'll draw some box for the first task that I want to create. And maybe instead of there, I'll draw a box for the checkbox for that task. Maybe I'll make it, I think my computer's like completely freezing. Oh no. Why is it so slow? Sorry, I think my computer is freezing. I'm going to try reloading my tab. This is very convenient because this never happens. Okay. I'm not sure why what is happening here, but sorry about that. I'm gonna try one thing which may help, which will require me to just sign back in. So just give me 1 second.
Okay, no problem. Can do that. All right, so that's a short break for us.
Yep, it's dinner time for me.
Perfect timing.
Yes, especially when I'm eating my curry.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks for bearing with me. I actually just restarted my browser and it seems to be working. So I'm going to share my screen again.
Perfect.
All right, hopefully you can see that now. I was just in the middle of creating a rough wireframe mockup of what I want the to-do app to look like. So I have my title, my task, my first task that I'm creating using the to-do app. Here's a circular checkbox, which I've styled using these right-hand controls. And next to it, I'll add some text, which is something like buy some milk. I'm just creating, roughly what I want the app to look like, and not worrying too much about styling or specific details. Now I have this task, and I'm just quickly drawing things on the screen. But let's say I want a bunch of these tasks in my to-do app. So one thing I can do is I can just copy and paste this this box a few times and get this kind of rough vertical list. You can definitely do that. But if I then later want to update or refine the look of this task, which I almost certainly will, then I then have to apply those changes to all the different copies that I made. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this and right-click it and create a component out of it. So I'm going to call this component my task component. And now I can just create a bunch of instances of this task. And if I edit any one of these instances, you can see that all of them are updated to reflect that change. So now I have, I think that is actually pretty much it for my wireframe. It's this very simple, look that I'm going for. Now from here, now that I'm happy with my wireframe, I'm going to refine it into something that actually has proper styling and colors and everything. So I'm going to start with this title here, which I'm going to make into a thin font and give it kind of like the light red hue. And maybe I'll save that color actually as my like primary color or something like that. And the idea is that you can define these design tokens and style tokens that you can reuse consistently throughout your app. Down here, actually, I'm going to set the background of the whole page to be this kind of maybe an off-white warm gray, just kind of trying to get maybe the right color here. And this is the kind of like super rapid feedback that Plasmic really tries to enable for you, is to make a change and instantly see it on the screen, even as you're dragging around different values. Below it, these tasks, I want the background of these to just be pure white, and the checkbox itself to be this transparent thing, but with a border, like a very faint light border, maybe something even lighter still. Yeah, I think that is probably pretty much it. I mean, maybe I'll adjust the color of the text as well to be a little bit lighter, not too low contrast. I'm going to save this color as my primary text, or my text color, I should say. Yeah, I think that is it for the styling. Now, of course, I have these tasks just kind of haphazardly placed into this rough vertical list, but I actually want them to have real layout, and that'll be useful for actually supporting a dynamic list as well. So what I'm going to do is, well, one thing you can do to introduce layout is I'm going to lasso these things into what's called a vertical stack. These stacks are, they're powered by Flexbox underneath, and they basically keep everything organized and distributed accordingly. So to see how this works, basically a layout is something that we've focused on a lot in terms of trying to make it really smooth and natural. So on the right, you can kind of see various options for configuring how layout works. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click this background to get rid of it so it's transparent. And you know, layout is one of these cross-cutting things that is really important to streamline as much as possible. So for instance, I can align everything to the top, align everything to the left, double-click an edge to auto-size the content vertically, maybe also on the horizontal axis. So these are some of the simpler features of layout system, but I'll show some more interesting things later on. So now we have this this container for all these tasks. I'm actually going to give it a name, task list, and naming elements just helps keep things organized, and also it'll come in handy later for the actual code integration part. So that is what I want my set of tasks to look like. Now, the text on these tasks is all identical, so that's a little boring. I want them to be different. In fact, I want them to be variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double-click this component to drill into editing it again. And I'm going to select this text and right-click it and convert it to what's called a slot. And essentially what slots are is it's kind of like poking a hole in the component so that from outside of the component, from any one of these instances, I can select that slot and I can change it up. I can write, for instance, to do app, show demo. But besides changing, customizing text and stuff like that, you can actually just fill these slots in with arbitrary content, any set of elements that you want. That's basically the way you achieve component composition in this. So that is pretty much it for what I wanted these tasks to look like. The only other thing I wanted to do was to design them in their different states. So for instance, you have a completed state or editing state, or these components often exist in one of many states. So I'm going to first, rather than continuing to double-click into this component to edit it, I'm going to pop it out into its own new artboard on the side. So you can create as many of these independent, isolated views of something as you want. So it's just convenience. And the way that things like state and interactions and things like that are modeled in Plasmic is through this unifying concept called variants. And the way variants work is I'm going to introduce a group of variants called states here, and maybe have one state that is my completed state. Maybe I'm also designing what it looks like when it's being edited or when it's marked high priority. And essentially, these are different, these different variants of the component let you specify a set of changes or differences that you want to show in the design. So as an example, I'm just going to design out the completed state. And for the completed state, maybe what I want is for there to be a check mark in this checkbox. So if I go back to the reference app, they actually have a nice check mark that I'm going to screen grab. So I'm going to grab this thing here, and just because I like the look of it. And I'm going to go back here and just paste it in. And I'm actually going to drill down to a pixel level here to adjust it. You can also use automatic layout. It doesn't really matter in this case. So I've basically designed out what I want my completed state to look like. So I can switch between my base appearance and my completed appearance so you can see the difference. Maybe the other thing I want to have happen for the complete state is for there to be this text to be struck out. So I'm going to select it and just make it strike out. And maybe I'll change the text color to be a little bit lighter as well. So to kind of show you what's going on, this is not a copy of the base appearance. This is actually just a set of overrides or deltas on top of the base appearance that we've recorded for the completed state. So to better explain that, I'm going to duplicate this artboard again. So I have another view of this thing. I'm going to set them side by side, and I'm going to set the bottom one to look at the base appearance of the component and the top one to look at the completed appearance. And so this, if I make more changes to, for instance, the base appearance, like if I move this thing around, you can see that bleed through into the completed appearance. But if I make changes that are specifically getting recorded for the completed appearance, then they're isolated to this, and they won't bleed back into the other variants. hopefully that made sense. This variance is a powerful primitive in the tool. So anyway, that is how you can achieve modeling states and combinations of states. And to show you actually combinations of states, let's say that besides the completed appearance, I also want to design what this thing looks like when you are hovering over any part of it. So like when I hover over this task, I want maybe the circle here to become darker. So I'm going to just actually, I'm going to create that variant first. So I'm going to create, because things like hover states and press states and whatnot are so common, there's a little bit of special support in Plasmic for these. So I'm just going to add a hover state here. And basically, whenever I'm hovering over this, I want this circle to become darker. So I'm just going to set its border color to be darker, like so. And so with these special interaction variants, you can actually preview the effects as well in preview mode. And as I'm hovering over this, so that's close to the effect that I want. But I notice another thing that I want is for there to be a hand pointer when I'm hovering over this thing. So I'm going to just go ahead and add that real quick. Going down here, I'm going to set the cursor to be pointer, and I'll try this again. Okay, so that's looking better. So again, just trying to let you get very rapid feedback. And these variants that we've created, they actually come with the component wherever you have instances of the component. So back in my main screen, I have these 3 instances. I can, just for the purposes of this mockup, select any one of them, configure what state it's in. I'm going to set this middle one to be in the completed state. I'm going to preview. I'm going to interact with this thing in the whole composed screen. So you can play with it, and it's a little subtle, but you can notice that as I'm hovering over this middle one, we are dynamically combining the hover state and the completed state for this middle component. So and that's possible just because all the differences that you're recording for the variants are represented as deltas or overrides. So they can be combined in this way that is fairly straightforward and predictable. So that is, I think, pretty much it for what I wanted to design out. And maybe the last thing I'll do is just tidy up the layout here, because everything is kind of just haphazardly placed. So I'm going to make everything flow as a column, centered. Maybe add some padding to the top and top and bottom here. Oops. Like so. And yeah, I think that is pretty much it. And I'm actually going to make this whole screen into a component as well, called my to-do app component. So now the project has these 2 components, my to-do app and my task components. And with that, that is pretty much it for the design phase. And now I actually want to bring this thing to life and work with it from a code perspective. So that's, I'm going to switch gears here and basically show you, one thing you can do to quickly play around with this thing in a code base is to use this code sandbox integration. And basically you can just click this button, and what it does is it spins up a code sandbox with the the generated code from these designs ready for you to just add behavior to, etc. So that's one way you can get started. I'm not going to wait for this thing to finish loading. More interesting for this demo is I'm going to show you how to basically generate things into an arbitrary code base that you have in on your computer as a git checkout on your local CLI. So for that, there's this code gen button that you can click, and basically there's these commands that you can run. Plasmic comes with a CLI that you can use to sync down the code components. And the first step I'm going to skip because I already have this installed. The first command that you run from your terminal is called Plasmic init. This is just something you run to get started using Plasmic in a code base. So I'm going to run it here. And by the way, this code base that I'm showing is a React code base. Everything we've talked about so far has been not specific to React. So it's something that we are, it's more forward-looking just to make sure we can stay agnostic as to the framework. But this is basically showing a syncing down into a React code base. And the code base that I have, this to-do MVC code base, is it's actually just a blank create React app, so a blank starter React app. So I can show you what a blank React app looks like. here. So it's just this spinning React logo. And it's into this code base that we're going to start seeing the to-do app that we created. So I ran Plasmic init, and now the second command I'm going to run is Plasmic sync. So this is what actually pulls down the components from this project that we just created. So I'm going to paste that in here, and it's going to sync down the components. We have the two components, to-do app and the task component. And so the first thing I'm going to do is get things on the screen. So I'm going to have my running app on the right and my code editor on the left. And this is basically the code for this kind of boilerplate starter app. I'm going to replace all this with just rendering my to-do app component that we synced down. So, and with that, I should see it reload. And yeah, now we have exactly what we created in the tool reflected in our local running app. Now, this is still showing the mock appearance of this task list. And of course, I want this to actually reflect my real data, my real state in the app. And so this is more getting into the React specifics, but I'm going to click into this to-do app to look at what's inside. Basically, there's a lot of comments here, but it's a very simple file. I'm going to actually get rid of all the comments so you can see what is going on. It's just a single line component that it's a thin wrapper around a Plasmic to-do app. So the way the code generation works is there's a Plasmic to-do app, which is this dumb presentational components that handles all the rendering and the styles that you've defined in the design tool. Just all it does is get things on the screen, and it exposes an interface that is flexible for you to consume. And then this to-do app component, this file that we're looking at, this is just a thin wrapper around the Plasmic to-do app. And the Plasmic to-do app is basically regenerated. It can be regenerated every time you make edits in Plasmic. But the to-do app, this is a file that's actually owned by you as a developer. And so you can do whatever you want with it. You can add your behavior and state and logic, etc. here. So to show you what is possible, I can basically just get this list to reflect my own set of state. So let's say I had some React state that is just some simple list of 3 JavaScript objects with a name or like a description property, like I do some stuff. And this is how tasks are represented in my app, let's say. Now, in the Plasmic to-do app component, I can just override any element in it. So for instance, I can refer to that task list element that we had given a name to earlier, if you remember that, and say that I'm going to replace all of its contents with my own set of tasks. I'm going to render using the other component that we synced down from the project, which is the task component. Whoops. Sorry. So the task and yeah, with that we should see our own set of states reflected in the app. So you can continue in this fashion and basically override any property of any element that you want, and it's just a very flexible kind of interface for you to work with. And if you want to add your own on-click handlers or what have you, these are all you can add whatever behavior and data bindings and things you want. So that's really how all there is to the code generation. It just provides you essentially with this library of dumb presentational components that you can do what you want with. And the real interesting part about this is that this is not just like a one-time code gen, but as I was alluding to earlier, it's something where you can actually go back into the editor and tweak your designs and the look of your UI and have that regenerated and resynced into your code base. So to show you that, I'm going to actually go back into my terminal, and I'm going to turn on this mode called watch mode, which will basically stream all the edits I make in the tool live into my code base. And so I'm going to go back into the running app. I'm going to have the running app kind of just sitting a little bit to the right. I don't have a ton of screen real estate, so it's It's going to feel a little squished. And then my editor, I'm going to have sitting on the left. And I'm going to make some changes. I'm actually going to try to make some violent changes to the layout and see what happens. So let's say instead of this vertical list, I'm going to change this to a set of tiles. And so what I can do is I'm going to double click this component to start editing it again. I'm going to make it look a little bit boxier, something like that. And I'm also going to give it some real layout. So I'm going to have everything kind of be this row layout, but where everything is top aligned. And maybe I'll set the padding to be 8 pixels. And I'm going to set this this checkbox to be free floating, and I'm going to move it down to the bottom right, like so. I'm going to pin it to the right and to the bottom. And then that was it for what I want to change these tasks to look like. Now they're still arranged in this vertical list. I actually want them to be, a set of row tiles that wrap around. And so for that, I'm going to select this whole task list. I'm going to set its layout to be a row layout instead of column layout. Now everything is spilling off the edges of the screen because there's too many tasks. So I'm going to also turn on wrapping so things can wrap around. I'm going to set this thing to be a fixed size, like so. And it's a little hard for me to tell apart the different tasks right now because they all have a white background. And so I'm going to introduce some gap in between them. So a gap in the vertical axis as well as the horizontal axis. And just random note, if you ever try to implement a cross-browser gap for Flexbox that is, that works well with things like wrapping and whatnot, you might recall that it is not, the most straightforward thing to do. It's actually kind of annoying. So these are all, but it's such a common, phenomenon that occurs in layout and design that, we thought it was important for this feature and other features to basically be a lot more simplified and streamlined. So, Plasmic just kind of takes care of that for you. So anyway, as I was making these changes, you could see that the app was actually reflecting all those changes live as I was going. So, just trying to really make it a lot simpler to compose the visuals of an application, and that way, you can spend less time basically wrangling CSS and layout and stuff, and more time actually implementing the developer value add, which is the business logic of your application. So anyway, that is a really whirlwind tour of what Plasmic is about and how it works. And as I was going through that, I would encourage you guys to think about how, if you were, trying to build something like Plasmic yourself, like how would you go about doing that? How would you, think about architecting or structuring an application like this? Because this itself is a fairly complex React application. It is also a React application itself. Actually, I guess that leads me to my next part in the talk, which is just pulling back the curtains a little bit and talking about some of the technical challenges and also product challenges for building this thing. But by the way, if you have any questions at all as I'm going through this, feel free to just ask away and feel free to interrupt me. I usually usually there's I would expect there'd be a lot of things that I'm missing or not doing enough justice to. So just feel free. Awesome. Cool. So I guess one of the first technical challenges I should mention is the just around the architecture of the app. Performance is very important throughout Plasmic because it's such an interactive tool, and as you're dragging things around, if you want those operations to be smooth and you want to shoot for 60 frames per second, then you have a frame budget of like 16 milliseconds per frame, and that's all the time you have really to do whatever work that you want to have happen. So I think this is just state management, and generally is this problem of how do you structure your application so that when you make state updates, only a small only the parts that need to change, that need to re-render, I should say, are re-rendered. That's the general problem of state management, right? How do you make it? How do you make that the default behavior? How do you make that as automated as possible and retain developer ergonomics so that it's easy to write new features without constantly worrying about how to what to invalidate, et cetera. Cache invalidation is the more general problem of what state management is about. So so for us, it's certainly no different. But I think what makes performance hard is we think about performance as both latency and scalability. So latency, this is again just making it making like drag proportions take a small amount of time quanta, but yeah, what makes it more interesting than your typical I guess state management problem is the fact that in this app I can have I mean, in this project, it's very simple. I have like these 3 artboards, but if you have hundreds of artboards on the screen at once, how do you keep that snappy and responsive? Ultimately, if I am if I have this task component rendered in many different artboards, and I am dragging, for instance, if I'm dragging this this checkbox around, how do I make sure everything is, stays smooth and responsive? So, an example of something we do is to break up the re-rendering work so that by default in React, but also in Angular, like when you update your state, you can trigger some re-renderings to happen, and by default, the app tries to keep everything consistent with respect to your state. And that's a reasonable default. But if the set of things that you have to re-render to stay consistent with the state is a lot, then you kind of box yourself into a corner in terms of the work that you have to take on. So so an example of the thing we do is we break up that work into lots of discrete incremental chunks that you can lazily evaluate. We basically stream these chunks into an evaluator that that prioritizes things according to a scheduler. So actually, you can see this in action a little bit as I'm dragging around this this checkbox. Keep your eye on the other artboards as I'm dragging this around. They generally stay in sync, but you can see that sometimes there's kind of a delay before the other ones update. They lag behind a little bit, and actually, I'm not sure how clearly that comes through over the stream, but this is because again of that incremental evaluation behavior where the scheduler prioritizes the frame that you're dragging within as the highest priority, and these other artboards as lower priority, and things off screen as even lower priority still. So that's one example of the kind of thing we worry about in terms of performance and latency and scalability. So. Another example of a technical challenge is basically around there's this feature that I haven't really shown in this demo, but it's called code components. So it's the ability to work with existing components that you've created outside of Plasmic from within the design tool. And this is of course very important for any sort of or many real-world code bases where you may already have some set of components that you are needing to work with. And so being able to work with those is basically what this feature is about. And it's a very complex set of work that we are doing to make that happen. Even just how do you bundle up your components and the code for them in a way that doesn't require your users to become, bundler experts or anything like that. That's one challenge. And then another challenge is, how do you dynamically load this foreign third-party code in a way that is secure and isolated into your canvas? But let's say you solve these problems, and now you actually have your, for instance, your material UI button rendering on the canvas. Then the next question is, how do you work with that? How do you actually configure its properties and manipulate it So that's essentially where a bunch of our language tooling comes in. So we have some basically code analysis tools that can, for instance, crawl your code base, find all the components in it, surface them, and reflect out the interfaces that they take. So whether these are documented using your type system or something else, reflect out what kind of interfaces they take, and then from there derive a set of controls that make the most sense for this component. And you can contrast this with the alternative, which is requiring your users to manually write adapters or controls for every component that they want to bring in, which is really tedious. So we try to derive that as automatically as possible. And there's a lot of nuance here. So for instance, at least in React, the way you do component composition is through these props that through props. And you have some props that are children props, which basically take other React elements as their value. And so distinguishing, most props you would expect to just manifest as like knobs on the right-hand panel, but then there's other props like these children props where you would expect to manipulate it directly on the canvas through drag and drop. And so this is one example of a kind of layer of complexity here. But there's a lot of other complex pieces like mining out examples of how to use these components is also really important for letting you get started easily. Because if you think about the way you actually tend to adopt a component library, is you probably install it and then you open up the documentation and look for examples of how do you put together a nav bar or something, in using the nav, the various components that are available in this library. And then you copy and paste that into your code base and you go. So examples are a very important part of letting you use a library. And so providing these examples for you is one of these workflows that we're trying to enable. So like you can just like pop up a drawer full of these examples and then just click the one you want, and now you have it in your app, rather than copy and pasting some code snippet or something like that from the documentation. Oops. Besides technical challenges, there's also a set of product challenges. Like I already mentioned, making layout intuitive and streamlined is really important because it's such a prevalent concern with building UIs. And what I mean by streamlined is, this is just referencing CSS layout specifically as something that is, I think, notoriously tricky to wrangle. And it's really powerful, CSS layout, but also there's a lot of different ways to accomplish similar outcomes, and some more legacy, some more modern, and they all have different trade-offs, subtle trade-offs, I should say, between them. And making sense of these differences is one challenge. There's just to this day, I still spend time debugging why my height percentages aren't working the way I expect them to. So, because in CSS there's like the use value and the declared value, and only some properties affect the declared value, which is what the height percentage of your child actually calculates a percentage off of, and then there's other properties that don't affect that, like flex properties. Certain flex properties don't affect that. Anyway, so this is like one of the more recent examples I can recall of wrangling layout. And so just trying to really simplify a lot of that, because most of the time you probably just want your element to be fixed size or stretched to fill the available space or to wrap its contents, right? And that's like 99% of your layout. It can be composed in this way, and for the remaining percent, you can drop down to specify exactly the flex spaces you want and all the other properties that you want. So so that's what streamlining layout is about. And then the other product challenge I would call out is, I didn't really show this in the demo here. I kind of created everything from scratch, but one of the features that that Plasmic tries to enable is for you to start from, not from scratch, but from if you work with a designer who has like given you a design in Figma or Sketch, to be able to start with that, and to and Plasmic does the heavy lifting of actually translating those proprietary document representations, which are very tend to be much more oriented around like layers and layer masks and blend modes and these other graphic design lineage concepts, and translate those into web standards like CSS and DOM and whatnot. And it's actually really tedious because just a random example, in CSS you have inset and outset shadows. In Figma, for instance, you have centered borders. And so, figuring out how to do that translation systematically is basically what this product work was about. And rather than the way that developers do it today, which is just ad hoc and very repetitive, grungy work. And I think the most interesting challenge, though, is really around what shape the code integration should take. And this is, of course, very central to the premise of Plasmic, which is, if you think about what's natural for visual direct manipulation, and then what's natural for working with from the code base, Plasmic is trying to essentially help you keep your code in sync with the design, but at the same time retain all the flexibility of just working with the code directly, right? And so essentially, we have actually a couple of different code generation schemes, but I think the one that has really played out the nicest is this one that I showed in the demo, which is the what we're calling the presentational library scheme. And again, this is just about giving you this library of dumb presentational components that you can just plop into your code base as if you had installed them from a library on npm, and just render them and pass in the props you want. So very simple and flexible. And I think in terms of the impact, at least on our own workflow of using Plasmic. So we use Plasmic to build Plasmic itself. So I can actually show you some. This could be fun. Basically, various surfaces and parts of Plasmic are all built out in Plasmic. And of course, Plasmic is a very dynamic, kind of complex app. So we thought it was good, like forcing function and stretching exercise for the tool itself. So I'm actually going to open up a few of these examples from this Plasmic kit set of projects that we have. Our work is kind of scattered across various projects. I'm going to find a few here. Plasmic kit. Oh yeah, the code sandbox dialog, share dialog. Okay, so maybe that's good to start with. So yeah, my computer is kind of chugging right now. Sorry about that. I have a very old MacBook Pro that if I actually push it too hard and the fan spins for long enough, then it will spontaneously reboot. So I'm always a little try to be a little careful about how far I push this machine. Anyway, I have this project open. It's showing the dashboard. So this is just the main kind of project list that I was looking at here. This is something we've designed out in Plasmic, along with the various states of all the card components on their hover and whatnot. As I'm hovering over this, you can kind of see those effects. There's a left bar here, which is this whole thing that we've designed out, and all the various panels within each of the sections. There's also the share dialog button, or share dialog, I should say, which is this thing, which we've designed out. The code sandbox dialog, which is this thing. Anyway, there's just a lot of these various surfaces in Plasmic. Various parts of the right sidebar, for instance. All the nicer looking parts, at least, were designed out in Plasmic. So yeah, for our own workflow, so this is what this is referencing. There's a few takeaways that we kind of had. One was that Plasmic really tries to make you think about and confront the design up front. And this is nice from the sense of like being a top-down, forcing function to make sure you are spending time thinking about what it is you're building toward and what are the parts you need in service of that. So all the code and the logic and whatnot is filled in service of that end goal, the product experience for your users. And this is nice because it makes sure that you are spending your time building the right thing. Bottom-up approaches definitely have their place, especially with projects that have higher technical risk. But for a lot of projects, it can also be more bumbling. I guess the second impact on our workflow was if you are lucky enough to have designers who I guess are technical enough to wield something like Plasmic, then there's definitely something very magical about just running Plasmic sync, and then you have a nicer version of your landing page appear in your code base without you having to do anything, which is, landing page is something I've been working on recently. And then the last impact I would call out is if you're familiar with visual regression test tooling or these other tools for conducting manual QA of your designs to make sure they line up with your code components. For instance, like these Storybook plugins for showing your Figma designs alongside your real buttons and whatnot. Then that's a class of things that we really hope to eliminate altogether, because essentially what you're doing with Plasmic is it's a very high level declarative language, right, that you're using to specify exactly what you want the end result to look like. And so just trying to eliminate any room for possible discrepancies or deviations between what you specify and what the outcome is. This is the most fun part for me, is just seeing what people are creating in Plasmic. Yeah, I think that is pretty much it. So thank you for listening. I don't know if I actually explicitly said this, but Plasmic is a very young tool. So if you're interested, please go ahead and just sign up. And if you mention this meetup, I'll just admit you right after this, and make sure you don't have to go through a wait list. I think that I would love to hear any and all feedback you have on Plasmic. It would really help us. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your presentation. So if anyone has any question for Yang, feel free to go ahead. So you can either use the chat and type your question in there, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. So I do have, I'm going to start with one question because I already had.
Awesome.
So how much, I mean, it's very impressive what you have right now. How much effort, how many people did you have work on this, and for how long? Because
yeah,
you're already in a pretty impressive shape at this point. Everything you showed was really wow.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's a lot of fun to work on. So our team is really small. They're amazing. It's a team of basically there's 3 on the engineering team. Okay. And we've been working on this for like 10 months or so. Okay. So yeah,
that's impressive.
It's yeah, I mean, the team is amazing, and but yeah, it's easy for us to become a little obsessed with this product just because it is a tool for folks like ourselves, people building front ends, and so it is it's fun to work on from that perspective. Yeah.
Nice. And so is everyone working full time on this?
Correct. Yeah. So we're just a small team, a small company. 5 people total. Yeah.
Nice. And so from a technical perspective, you mentioned that right now the output is always React. Do you know when you're going to start with other frameworks, for instance? Do you have a roadmap for those?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely on our roadmap. We don't have, very precise, or at least meaningfully precise times on the roadmap. But I think a lot of our prioritization is just colored users and what we're hearing. So, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So these are all the questions I had. Let's see if we have anything in the chat. I don't see any questions. Anyone else? 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. Everybody's muted, so I guess we are all good. So thanks for your presentation. Right. That was really interesting and pretty impressive. I mean, I've seen a lot of UI tools in the past. This one seems really pretty advanced, considering that it only started less than 1 year ago. So really nice job on that. And yeah, thanks a lot for coming tonight and doing this talk for us. We definitely appreciate it.
Oh, thanks again for having me. Yeah.
No problem. Thank you.
Fun. All right, thanks everyone
for coming.
Have a good night.
Yeah, have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.